This is a production of the AJ Podcast Network.
What's going on, people? What's going on, people? Today is a very important day. This is the launch of the podcast that is very much needed, starring the Dr. Stanley Rushing. The name of our podcast today is Passage Home. I'm going to say it again. Passage Home Podcast. And I'm going to let Dr. Stanley Rushing go ahead and jump it off and tell the people what it's about and what it means and what we're going to be doing on this journey in this Passage Home Podcast. Let's go, Dr. Stanley Rushing.
My name is Dr. Stanley Rushing. I was born on November 26th, which just happens to be the same date as Dr. Sebi. And so naturally, since I was 15, I had always had an interest in herbal medicine. But let's start this journey off right. I want to start. I am a Pan-Africanist, and I want to explain how my journey started and where I am today and why I'm talking with Terrence about the future and where we are and where we need to go. And, I'll start at the present, and I'm going to go back to the beginning. In the present, somebody asked me last week, what do you think about the election? And I told them, I said, I'm not looking for a new Pharaoh. I'm trying to put together an Exodus plan. So now let's go back and to the beginning, how I got to this point. I grew up on the west side of Chicago, and I grew up during a period I was 14, about in the 60s, and I lived in a war zone. Somebody was killed every day when I was growing up. I grew up crossing yellow tape. Sometimes behind that tape were friends of mine or relatives of friends of mine, and that happened every day.
Wow.
I went to my mother I got kicked out of public school when I was in the third grade. And so my mother put us in a Catholic school. So that entailed us walking through 2 gang territories every day with a shirt and tie on. So that was my education. I learned wit as to how.
Let me ask you this question real quick.
Yes, sir.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but you said something that really I want to ask you on. Like, you was walking through gang territory with the shirt and tie on. How was that?
Yeah.
How was that, like, going through it?
Just like you imagine, and worse. I was a target.
Yeah.
And stuff. I was chased by girl gangs, boy gangs, peewees. I remember once we crossed the street because we didn't want to walk past some gangbangers who was standing in front of a bar called the Bucket of Blood on 16th Street. And when we crossed the street, it was some peewees over there. and so the OGs told peewees handle that for us.
Right. Right.
And so I remember being chased with a German Shepherd. I actually outran a German Shepherd. That was just one day in my life of getting home and stuff. And my best friend, Ricky Jones, back then, way back in the 60s, we went through all kind of cycles of he had to deal with the fact that he was really dark skinned, and he was so dark they called him Blue back in the day.
Right.
And we had to get collegiate bald haircuts because our hair wasn't the grade of the bougie mulatto students that were in Catholic school, because when you go to Catholic school, you got Puerto Ricans, you got Mexicans, and you got very middle class blacks that are lighter complexion.
So the thing that really struck my attention on just a certain ties with the Catholic school thing, because I'm from Syracuse, New York, is way smaller than in Chicago, but some of the same issues in the black communities, we're going through some of the same issues everywhere in every community. So, my community where I'm from, I grew up, my father died before I was born. You feel me? 2 weeks before I was born, and my mother was left, for about 4 or 5 years, just me and her and my family. And so she promised my father that she was going to do the best, that she could for me. So she put me in the private school. So I had to wear the shirt and the tie and stuff like that, in elementary and stuff like that. And I could remember, because your grandmother gonna raise you and watch you. And grandma always live in the hood, like, so when grandma raised you and watch you, you gotta, you going to school. I mean, you going to grandma's house after school. You got your uniform on, and you going to the same Boys and Girls Club and the same Dunbar centers and things like that. And you there with your uniform on. So sometimes you do have to fight people looking at you different just because you have a shirt and a tie on. But the question is, why? Why do we look at our own differently when they got the shirt and tie on, or they're preppy, or they're looking good, or like that's a problem? And that's a really good question. You know what I'm saying? But
well, put it like this: you are a person that's preparing for life, walking through a jungle of people who don't really care about life and not looking for to a future or anything. So you're odd, you're an oddball.
Yeah.
And you back then, remember, gay men couldn't walk down the street. Handicapped children couldn't play with everybody else. They were isolated and put on buses, taken elsewhere. So we were segregated within ourselves while being segregated as a race.
Right.
From everything else. So everybody was looking down on others, and the strongest were the ones that were dominating. So me being a nerd, trying to go to school and prepare myself from college, was odd to them.
Wow. That's crazy.
And they had like it was a subconscious thing, because the squares, even the squares amongst us, and even in the Catholic school, we had super nerds.
Yeah.
One brother, his name was Willie, and Willie wore Coke bottle glasses. He had really big red lips, and he looked like a racial stereotype. And he was very quiet. He always stayed back. He never spoke up, never drew attention to himself. But Willie went on to become a petroleum engineer.
Wow.
And a mechanical engineer.
Right.
And right now today, the last I heard, Willie was over Northern Gas for the city of Chicago. And they just did a remodel where they dug up most of all the major gas lines in Chicago, and he was in charge of all of it, making $2 million a year.
Wow.
Whereas most of the brothers, a lot of people that talked and laughed about them are either dead or in jail today.
And that's true, and that's crazy. And the thing about it is, like, I'm a little bit younger than you. I'm in my 30s, my mid 30s right now, but I'm listening to some of the same things that you said that you went through, and I experienced it too. When I think about the psyche of the community, like mine was just a little bit different. Like growing up in my private schools, like some of the guys that were going to jail and some of the guys that did some of the killings and some of the guys that got killed, they went to the private school too. So it was a time in the 80s and the 90s when parents that came from the bottom and parents that came from the struggle, they were trying to invest in their children, you know, and it was just like a melting pot of everything. So it was like, you know, we all grew up together, and, you know, it's just like, yeah, like sometimes some of the parochial schools were just as bad as some of the public schools. You know, it was just
Right.
like some of the same
And
things.
there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Because the occupants, just like myself, remember I told you I was in Catholic school because I got kicked out of public school.
Right.
So a lot of times parents are trying to do their best, but my parents did. They see the trajectory you're on, and they try to get you into into a better situation. And I got tons of stories of guys in the public schools. I mean, from public school, whose grandma and their brother was paying that high tuition, trying to steer them to another path. But it's almost like going to Baptist church.
Yeah.
A lot of the people standing up in there, they got chased up in there by the devil. By all the stuff out the street.
That's
they
a fact.
came in there running and slid into the pulpit to the podium, and the preacher declared them saved, you know,
so
but they still carrying a lot. I mean, I'm not going to get into the church, but, you know, there's a lot happening up in there and stuff. But you got to realize a lot of people in there came there to try to get away from what they are deeply involved in the world.
And that's that's a deep subject, and that brings us back to why we need to make our exodus, you know, and
Right.
and this is going to be a very good podcast. This podcast is going to touch a lot of people, because this is the conversation that us as Black people, Africans, Americans, or Africans in America, or children of Israel, whatever you want to call us, this is a conversation that we need to have. So
African fruit, African root, American fruit.
Right, and I like that. And you were talking about the Exodus. So I know we veered off when we were talking about you know, the jumble up, because it was basically a jumble up. Like we are here trying to be the best that we can be, you know, and
Right.
and live the best lives that we can live, even with the things that we had to deal with since the beginning of time, since the beginning of you know, slavery and, you know, our ancestors. So let's talk about that Exodus, because I feel like that Exodus is get us back to our original and our meaning and our purpose, our true purpose.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There's quite a bit. You know, we're going to be doing this for a while. I wanted to finish my bio as to how I got to this Exodus, because there's some very important things that were instilled in me when I was young that got me to go through everything I went through to get to this point. And I would like to share on that level.
We're listening.
And okay. So so as I was growing up, and the gunfire was out there, and I relegated to the back porch. That was me going outside. And then as we grew older, because there was a lot of bullets flying, we got a chance to go to the backyard. Then from the backyard, we got a chance to play in the alley behind the house. Don't go out of view. From there, we went to the front porch, and from the front porch, we got to the sidewalk. So from the sidewalk, we're relegated to 2 houses down on this side and 2 houses down on that side. And then we got to, you can go to the corner, but don't go around the corner. I was 15 when I was allowed to go around the corner and stuff. And I only did that briefly and got back within eyesight. And you know, the street light, that we could not be outside when the street lights came on, because it was nighttime and stuff. And so that's how bad it was. So I grew up with a lot of rage. I never learned how to swim. I never learned how to roller skate. Uh, when I got my first bike, it got taken from me, and I got a whooping for that because I was around the corner. You know,
Wow.
when it went down, my parents knew, but I didn't realize there were predators waiting for me to go around that corner and stuff. So, I look back, all of the regulation that they put on me was purposeful. But I don't want to belabor the point. What I'm pointing out here is that the restrictions that I had was what kept me alive. For the most part, being obedient and listening, because my parents had the foresight. As we speak today, there is no male on the block which I grew up on that's not dead, in jail, or on drugs, including my brother. You know, and so when I look back, the blessing, but here's the part that developed in me this rage that would send me through some rebellious periods, and that rage was same thing kids feel now, because they have to be escorted to school. They got to be searched before they go in the class. And then you got some decent kids who are rebelling because they say, I haven't done anything wrong, but I'm being treated like a criminal. So when you're in that situation where somebody's looking out for you, but with them looking out for you, you're in a prison. And so that's a special feeling that you feel. You feel your life has been robbed from you, and you're not living a normal youth. So I had but I don't know how to express it, but that was a righteous indignation, rage that I had that made me triggered me to doing things that started my life and left memories in people's minds. They thought I was crazy and stuff.
So this is where it started.
Yeah, this is where it started. So one day, I couldn't even go to the front porch without permission. I used to see the gangbangers walking up and down the street, and I thought, that the freedom that they had was something that I wanted, and so I yearned for. And it wasn't until I got to the 8th grade, because my mother see me looking there, and sometimes I wave at them, and I would make the Boy Scout sign to a guy who lived down the street who was a gangbanger and stuff. And he was a Boy Scout at one time. He made the sign back to me. So I couldn't throw a gang sign, but I threw a Boy Scout sign. And so I thought, that was my relationship with the outside world, to be able to connect. But that guy that his name was LT. LT eventually, two things that stood out that he did. He and a guy named David Lee, they raped a 82-year-old woman, white woman, who was the last white person in the neighborhood. And they raped her, and they poured 151 proof brandy, hers, over her in her house and burned her up. And they went to jail for that.
Wow.
That was my block.
And that was the difference. That was the difference between being able to get off the porch and not being able to get off the porch.
Right. That was known with the gunfire. It sounded like Vietnam on the weekends in my neighborhood. And so later, LT, because my mother told me, because my purview was that he had freedom. My mother's purview was that she said, I see you signaling that N-word and stuff. She said, I'm gonna tell you something. She said, one day that nigga is gonna bust hell wide open, and I didn't know what it meant, but back then and stuff. So he went on, and him and David Lee murdered a police officer. Took his gun and his badge, buried it in their backyard. And one day we saw police line the whole block, the whole neighborhood, and they were arresting him, and they took him to jail.
So hold on, didn't they rape the old lady first, or they didn't go to jail when they raped the old lady?
Yeah, first. They went to see. Here was the problem. That was back when before they can charge you as an adult. That was the reason why they started charging you as an adult, because of the 14 and 15-year-olds in Chicago and stuff.
Oh, that's crazy.
He was about 15 when they raped that old lady and stuff, and then but he went to jail, and he got out of jail from killing a police officer before he was 18. But something happened to him while he was in jail. When he came out, his head was swollen almost twice the size that it was. He was hooked on heroin and stuff. And so I watched this guy as I was growing up, that his family had left the house abandoned where he lived because they were harassed by the police. They had to get out of the neighborhood. And when he came back, he didn't have any place to stay. And as cold as it gets in Chicago, he lived in an abandoned house. He had a fire constantly burning in the front yard, even through the harsh winters in Chicago and stuff. And he sold drugs out there.
Wow.
And to make a living. And so he was a hardcore, but he eventually died. And when he died, all of the OGs, from back in the day, came to his funeral, and there was a little red church right next to where we lived. And my father looked out the window, and some of these guys haven't been there, been around and 10 years and stuff, but they were all out there. And then he realized it was LT's funeral. Wow. But they were standing around, and the funeral hadn't started because there was a delay. Because what happened was this: as the hearse was bringing the casket to the church, they ran a light and got hit by a fire truck.
The hearse?
Yeah.
The hearse with his body in it?
Huh?
The hearse with his body in it?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It hit that hearse so hard that it knocked the casket out of the back of the back of the hearse. His body rolled out, and a truck ran over him.
Wow. Somebody was mad at him, for real.
Well, no, it was very simple. And when my mother heard it, she was walking through. You see that little meme with the frog drinking a martini saying, "I'm just saying." Yeah. My mother, she passed through, and she said, "I told you that nigga was gonna buzz hell wide open."
He really did.
Yeah.
He really did. So that just goes to show that the life you live, man, is the life you gonna die. Like, and it's crazy. Karma. You put out all that negative energy, it happens. And Chicago has been been like that for years.
Yes, long before that. All the way back to Al Capone and stuff.
That gang banging is serious out there, man.
Right. They took it to another level that would make Al Capone turn over in his grave. But I want to wind it up here and take off, because like I said, I'm watching everything that Marvin Gaye said about all the confusion, everything the Temptations said about the ball of confusion, that was in those years right there.
Yeah.
And that turmoil was boiling within me. And because I was caught in the middle of but there were a lot of resolution, because one of the things we're going to talk about, I made another documentary on the fact that there is no freedom without responsibility, and that's what a lot of teens and need to know, because we really think we're grown at 18. Our brain don't finish growing until we're 25, so there's no way we can claim adulthood at 18 and stuff.
Wow. That's gonna be an excellent topic for the next show. I feel like they
Right.
definitely need that, especially with what happened with the guy from Chicago that just got killed recently in Atlanta, the kid King Von. It's a lot of them that's getting shot like all the time,
Right.
and they'll just be right at the brink of their career, and in a month in, and now they're gone. So that was
Right.
that's like
Right.
really sad. So that's definitely an excellent topic.
Right. And we'll also talk about what real prosperity is.
Okay.
And because a lot of people don't understand that. They think, they're thinking the wrong way, and it's very plain. It only means to have the road ahead of you made good.
Yeah.
And so you can complain all you want, but there are a lot of people ain't here today that
Right.
didn't make it to 66 years old.
Yeah.
And stuff.
So
So we're gonna speak on that.
let's definitely speak on that. So ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens, this is it. This is our first show with the Dr. Stanley Rushing, my mentor, Dr. Stanley Rushing. Passage Home. I'm pretty sure when you hear that, you already know where we're going with it. But we're gonna
Right.
take a journey with this, though. This is gonna be a journey through our podcast. We're gonna have some visitors. We're gonna have some special guests, and we're gonna really expand this thing. Anything you want to say before we get
Right.
up out of here, Doctor? We got about 2 or 3 more minutes left. Anything you want to say?
Well, I'm looking forward to what's coming up. Like you said, we have a heck of a real agenda. I got people in Africa, people who have lived in Africa, brothers who have lived in Israel. I'm dealing with a sister right now from Ghana who lived in Israel for about 40 years and helped finance the Hebrew Israelite movement before they had cash flow like they have today and stuff. And she's one of my patients right now.
Wow.
And that's deep. Those brothers that left in '67, I revered when they were their movement and what was the consciousness, the wokeness of with the moves they made. But now I'm a counselor to brothers that are older than me, who speak 3 languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and so on and so forth. And we sit down and talk scripture every day. They actually record me when I call them and stuff. So I got a lot to share, and through my mentee Terrence, I'm more than happy to share it with you.
Definitely. You said something about talking scripture. I can't wait to get into that, man. I like talking scripture too. I really want to get into that because it's really power in scripture. So this is it.
Yes, sir.
This is it, man. Passage Home.
All right. Hey, good start.
Good start. We see y'all later.
Yes, sir. All right.